This is Math 6, Lesson 3-1, describing a pattern. A term is a number in a pattern. So if I have a pattern that goes 1, 2, 3, 4, each one of those numbers is considered to be a term. The 4 happens to be the fourth term in that pattern. A conjecture is a prediction about what might happen in a pattern. For example, in the pattern above, you might say that you're just going to continue to add 1 to each of the previous number, so that my next number in the pattern would be 5, and that would be a conjecture. A sequence is a set of numbers that follows a pattern. Like, for instance, 1, 3, 5, 7, 9. As long as you keep adding the numbers in the same way, that's considered to be what we call a sequence. The 3 dots after the 9 in this particular sequence tells you that this sequence continues to go on. Now, finding a number pattern. Sometimes you'll be given a table like this one, where you will have a number in a specific table, and you're supposed to figure out what the pattern happens to be. Let's just say that you're making a picture, and you're making it out of tiles. In the first design, you have 1 tile. In the second design, you have 4 tiles. In the third design, you have 7 tiles. In the fourth design, you have 10 tiles. And you want to figure out how many tiles you'll have in the 5th design and the 6th design. So what you do here is you want to see what the pattern is on the bottom set of numbers. If I look here, I go, what do I do to get from 1 to 4? Oh, I added 3. What did I do to get from 4 to 7? I added 3. What did I do to get from 7 to 10? I added 3. Therefore, the pattern in this should be to add 3. So if I said, 10 plus 3, that would be 13. And 13 plus 3, that would be 16. So the 5th design has 13 tiles, and the 6th design has 16 tiles. Sometimes you're just given numbers and you're asked to find their pattern. When this happens, the best thing to do is to look and see what they did to get from the first number to the second number. If the numbers go up, then try some subtraction. Subtract this first number from the second number. If I said, 12 minus 5, that happens to be 7. And so I can say, from 5 to 12, I added 7. Does that pattern continue? Well, from 12 to 19, I add 7. From 19 to 26, I add 7. So that is obviously what my pattern is. So to find the next 2 numbers in this pattern, I would say 26 plus 7. That gives me 33. And then I would say 33 plus 7. And that gives me 40. So my next 2 numbers in this pattern are 33 and 40. You have to be careful here, because if you mess up if I messed up the 26 plus 7 and I said it was 32, and then I added 7 to 32, I would get 39 instead of 40. So if you mess up the first number, you will mess up the rest of the pattern. So be very careful with your addition and subtraction. Sometimes you can use a rule to describe a pattern. A rule will state the first term and an explanation of the operations you need to use to find all of the other terms in the pattern. So if we write the first 6 terms in each pattern, and I say start with 47 and subtract 3 repeatedly. It means I start with 47. So if I want to find my 6 terms, I'll go, start with 47, subtract 3. That happens to be 44. Go 44, subtract 3. That happens to be 41. Take 41, subtract 3, that happens to be 38. take 38, subtract 3, that happens to be 35. 35, subtract 3 is 32. And last but not least, 32, subtract 3 is 29. So if I apply the rule, my next 6 terms, or my first 6 terms in the pattern, are 44, 41, 38, 35, 32, and 29. So I could write those in order below: 44, 41, 38, 35, 32, and 29. And notice how I did not erase my work, because I want to be able to see later what I did to come up with my pattern, just in case I forgot. Let's look at a different pattern. We're going to start with 3 and multiply by 3 repeatedly. So if I start with 3, 3 times 3 is 9. 9 times 3 is 27. 27 times 3 is 81. There's my first 3 numbers in my pattern. Then 81 times 3, 243. 243 times 3, let's see, I might have to do that off to the side here. 3 times 3 is 9, 4 times 3 is 12, 3 times 2 is 6, 729. And then 729 times 3. 5 times 3 is 27, 3 times 2 is 6, 8, 2,187. Notice if you get off on one of your multiplications here, the rest of your terms will be incorrect. So be very careful with your patterns to make sure that you are doing your math correct. So the first 6 terms in this pattern are 9, 27, 81, 243, 729, and 2,187. The last thing we're going to talk about is writing a rule. To write a rule means that you understand what the pattern is and you can explain it to someone else. So we're going to write the next 3 terms and write a rule to describe this pattern. If I look at this first one, 2.3, 4.4, 6.5, 8.6, I can look at this and say, gee, what did I do to get from 2.3 to 4.4? Well, if I subtract 2.3 from 4.4, I'll notice it's 2.1, so I added 2.1. If I did go to 4.4 to 6.5, if I add 2.1, does 4.4 plus 2.1 equal 6.5? It does. So my pattern here must be adding 2.1. Oops, not 0.21, 2.1. So if I was going to write this pattern, I would need to explain to somebody what my pattern is. I have to say what I started with and what I did. So my rule would be start with 2.3 and add 2.1 repeatedly. Then I need to find my next 3 numbers in the pattern. So if I take 8.6 and I add 2.1, that's going to give me 10.7. If I take 10.7 and I add 2.1, that's going to give me 12.8. And if I take 12.8 and I add 2.1, that is going to give me 14.9. So my next 3 numbers in the pattern are 10.7, 12.8, and 14.9. And my pattern is I'm going to start with 2.3 and add 2.1 repeatedly. Let's look at this next pattern. I start with 256, then I go to 128, then I go to 64. I'm looking at this going, I believe those are divided by 2. Half of 256 is 128, half of 128 is 64. So my pattern is start with 256 and divide by 2 repeatedly. So there's my pattern. Start with 256 and divide by 2. Repeatedly. You always have to tell people what number you're starting with, what you're doing, and how long you should repeat it. If you say repeatedly, that means without end. Now I need to find my next 3 terms. So if I take 64 and I divide that by 2, I get 32. If I take 32 and I divide that by 2, I get 16. And if I take 16 and I divide that by 2, I get 8. And obviously, if you need to show the division off to the side, you need to do that so that people can understand what you did. And this is lesson 3-1.